From the Digital Media Center on the campus of Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon. This is Ramping Up Your English, an educational program for intermediate level English language learners. Here's your host for Ramping Up Your English, John Letts.
Welcome to Ramping Up Your English. This is episode 105. Our thematic unit is Native Americans. In previous episodes, we've seen how explorers, and in some cases settlers, from the countries of Portugal, Spain, and France affected Native Americans and the kind of interactions they had with the Native Americans. Well, in today's episode, we're going to answer the question about other European countries who got involved in all of this business of coming over from Europe and interacting with Native Americans. So we're going to look at Dutch and English exploration and settlement. It's called Newfound Land. But this land was found thousands of years ago, and then found again, time after time, by a succession of groups. European explorer John Cabot found it again for King Henry VII in 1497, only 5 years after the voyage of Columbus. Cabot stayed aboard his ship, the Matthew, for most of the voyage, but he came ashore to replenish water supplies and claim the land for England. That brief visit would have consequences for the people who lived here, people who avoided contact with the Europeans. Cabot's voyage energized the court of King Henry VII. Cabot was sent out for more exploration. So was his son Sebastian Cabot. John Cabot was lost at sea. Sebastian explored the eastern seaboard and returned to England to find King Henry VII had died, and the new king uninterested in America. That new king was Henry VIII. He was determined to have a son, an heir to the throne. He went through 6 wives and broke from the Catholic Church when it wouldn't grant him a divorce. All these wives never bore him a son, but he did get a daughter. She was Queen Elizabeth I, and she was very interested in getting England involved in America. In 1558, Elizabeth became the queen. She had the services of Captain Francis Drake.
Oh, we'd be all right if the wind was in our sails. We'd be all right if the wind was in our sails. We'd be all right if the wind was in our sails. And we'll all hang on behind.
She sent Drake to pillage Spanish ships carrying gold and silver from America. Drake also attacked Spanish settlements in America. In 1577, Queen Elizabeth sent Drake on a trip around the world. He left Plymouth with 5 ships and 154 crew members to attempt the second circumnavigation of the world.
Oh, it'd be all right if we make it around the Horn. Oh, it'd be all right if we make it around the Horn. Oh, it'd be all right if we make it around the Horn, and we'll all hang on behind.
Drake attacked Spanish settlements on the Pacific coast, Valparaiso and Lima, for example. By now, he was down to 1 ship, which he renamed the Golden Hind. He followed the west coast north as far as Cape Arago to Oregon Dunes near today's Coos Bay. Drake sailed south again, where he came ashore in California. He encountered a friendly reception by the Miwok Indians, who helped his crew prepare for crossing the Pacific Ocean. In 1580, Drake returned to Plymouth with 1 ship and 59 crew members. Queen Elizabeth was more than pleased with Drake's accomplishment, but she soon called on Drake for more. Spain assembled a huge armada of ships to attack England. The King of Spain had had enough of Drake's aggressions. The Spanish invaders ran into a storm, and Drake attacked them using fireboats to scatter the fleet. It was a complete disaster for Spain. They could no longer control the seas, and now England was able to get a foothold in America. Queen Elizabeth sent Drake to hunt down and attack surviving Spanish ships and to keep marauding Spanish settlements in America. So Drake sailed again, but his attack on Puerto Rico was unsuccessful, and he soon died, not in battle, but from dysentery. He was buried at sea. Sir Francis Drake was not the only one sailing for England. Queen Elizabeth wanted a permanent colony in North America from which privateers could rob Spanish treasure fleets. The Secotan people lived on an island near the Grand Banks of today's North Carolina. When English sailors came ashore one day, the Secotan were eager to establish friendly relations. The island was called Roanoke by the English. The ship brought 2 Native Americans back to England, a Secotan and a Monteo from the mainland Croton area. The new colony was off to a promising start. When the English returned, they began building Roanoke, fortifying the colony against Spanish attack. Then the sickness came. The Secotan had no immunity. The deadly disease seemed to be caused by some supernatural forces unleashed by the English. Disease spread throughout the region, having an impact on the fall harvest. Some supply ships failed to arrive, and the colonists developed an over-reliance on Secotan food. Hostilities broke out when colonists burned a native village to the ground. Some colonists were left on Roanoke while others returned to England to arrange for a better supply. Proprietor Walter Riley sent more colonists with fresh supplies. When they returned in 1590, they found Roanoke deserted. A hint was blazed on a tree trunk, Croton, but the colonists were never located. It's a mystery to this day. The Powhatan Confederacy united numerous tribes along the James River. They became powerful by joining together, able to escape dominance by neighbors. Chief Powhatan's people occupied the mouth of the river at Chesapeake Bay. He came to greet the ship carrying English settlers. These Englishmen began setting up quarters on a low-lying peninsula that the Powhatans used seasonally to collect shellfish. They named it Jamestown after the King of England. The Powhatans were Algonquian-speaking people, as were the Secotan and many other widespread indigenous groups in North America. The Powhatans lived in scattered settlements along rivers. It was 1607 when the English arrived and established Jamestown. Chief Powhatan welcomed the English and suggested a spot on higher ground for the colony. He was ignored, but they started with good relations. When rains came, Jamestown turned into a marsh. Mosquitoes and poor sanitation carried deadly diseases to the colonists. 80% died that first year, despite help from the Indians. Some survivors left Jamestown to live in Native American communities. Jamestown colonists failed to raise enough food. Instead, they accepted and then demanded food from the Powhatan. Captain John Smith was almost killed by Chief Powhatan, but his daughter Pocahontas intervened, depicted in this highly inaccurate painting. tensions eased when colonist John Rolfe married Pocahontas. The couple visited England, where Pocahontas was treated like a princess. The marriage ended early and tragically. Pocahontas died of a disease when she was only 21 years old. In 1619, Jamestown received the first African slaves, forced to work in tobacco fields. More colonists arrived in Jamestown, putting greater pressure on the Powhatan. The demands for food and more land became intolerable. The breaking point came in 1622. Powhatan leadership passed to the war captain, and over 300 colonists were killed. The 1622 Jamestown Massacre was a desperate message where others had failed. Colonists who had demanded food were found dead with bread stuffed in their mouths. These messages failed to change the behavior of the colonists. Jamestown continued to grow. Powhatan people were pushed off their land. It was a disaster for the Powhatans. It was considered a great success by the English.
Who would true valor see? Let him come hither. One here would constant be, come wind, come weather.
Not everyone aboard the Mayflower was a pilgrim, but the passengers were. They were members of a sect that rejected elements of the Church of England. They called themselves Puritans. They came to America to escape persecution at the hands of King James and the main church. They suffered a long, stormy crossing and an uncertain future so they could be free to worship as they saw fit. The Mayflower was supposed to carry them to Virginia to establish a colony near Jamestown, but a storm blew them north. Since they would no longer be under the laws of Virginia, they made their own, based to some extent on democratic principles. It was called the Mayflower Compact. The Puritans found shelter at last at Cape Cod. Many were too sick or too weak to come ashore, so they stayed aboard the Mayflower. Those who were hale rowed ashore at a place we now call Plymouth Rock. There were plenty of prayers thanking God for their safe arrival. They were not ashore long before they were greeted in friendship and welcome by Samoset of the Wampanoag people. The Wampanoags were coastal Indians who sustained themselves through seasonal round migration. They were also farmers, growing the Three Sisters, corn, beans, and squash. They were known as the People of the Dawn. They lived in small villages, and like most Native Americans, spent most of the year preparing to survive the cold New England winters. Men did most of the hunting and fishing. Women played an important and active role in most food production. The Puritans had neither the skills nor the knowledge to feed themselves here. 50 of the 100 pilgrims starved to death that first winter. A Native American they called Squanto taught them to raise corn and other food. Squanto also connected them with the beaver trade. He lived with them and helped them communicate with their indigenous neighbors. To their credit, the Puritans followed his advice, and the land provided an abundance for the new colony. The generosity of the indigenous population kept the Pilgrims alive long enough to harvest their crops the following fall. Native Americans had gathered at various times of the year, and the Pilgrims added to that legacy, inviting their Native American neighbors to celebrate their successful harvest. This gathering became part of American culture. It's known as the first Thanksgiving, as celebrated in this painting. There's plenty shown here that would foretell of harmony between Native Americans and Europeans, but there's much more to this story than this peaceful scene.
shall make him once relent his first avowed intent to be a pilgrim.
The Plymouth colony continued to grow, and demands on the Wampanoags intensified. The Narragansett people lived between the Pequot Mohegan and the Wampanoag, living in ways similar to their neighbors, hunting, fishing, and farming. They also competed with their neighbors in the fledgling trade in beaver pelts for European trade goods. When Roger Williams was cast out of the Puritans in Massachusetts, he lived with the Narragansetts before setting up his own colony. Although the Narragansetts suffered attacks by the Wampanoag, they joined with them and the Puritan colonists in their fight against the Pequots in the Pequot War. The Pequot War was the bloodiest war yet between English colonists and Native Americans. It ended in 1637 with the complete destruction of the Pequot Confederation. Those not killed in battle were enslaved. Even the name Pequot was banished. Narragansett warriors were disturbed by some of the actions of the colonists in what they considered unnecessary killing and exportation of captured warriors as slaves. 45 years later, a new war emerged. Chief Massasoit of the Wampanoag died, and his son Metacom led the tribe. Known as King Philip by the colonists, Metacom saw the need to rid New England of the land-hungry colonists. Besides being pushed out of their homeland, their religion was under constant attack by the Puritans. Tribes from near and far sent warriors, but the Narragansetts stayed neutral. Early victories belonged to the Wampanoag. 52 of 90 colonial settlements were attacked. Colonists didn't trust the Christianized Wampanoag to fight, so they moved them to an island in Boston Harbor. King Philip endeavored to rid New England of the English colonists. They had the element of surprise, and their weapons of war proved deadly to the colonists. When the colonists fought back, the tide turned. Some of the Wampanoag sought shelter in a Narragansett fort. The colonists attacked that fort despite the neutrality of the Narragansett. This was known as the Great Swamp Massacre. 600 Narragansett, mostly women and children, were killed. Narragansett sachem Canonchet was captured, tortured, killed, and dismembered. King Philip escaped, but at Mount Hope he was tracked down and killed. His wife and son were sold into slavery. King Philip's war resulted in the deaths of over 5,000 Indians and 2,500 colonists. It was the bloodiest conflict in the colonial era, but it wasn't the last. Native Americans along the Hudson River were astonished at the sight. It was 1609, and Henry Hudson sailed up the river for the Dutch. Other navigators had noted the river's location, but Hudson entered the river and sailed up to today's Albany. He was searching for the mythical Northwest Passage to China, but he found riches right here for his sponsors. He quickly established trade in beaver pelts. Smelling profits, the Dutch soon established trading posts throughout the region. They paid the Lenape people for the land on which to build a city to support this trade, the city of New Amsterdam. The Dutch also took over the small farming community of New Sweden. They became competitors with the English in the beaver trade and a buffer between them and the French. For over 50 years, the Dutch traded with the Iroquois and other tribes, but they were attacked by the English, and had to retreat from North America, including New Amsterdam. In English hands it became New York. The peace of these woodlands was not easy to achieve. There was so much violence between the 5 tribes that lived here. Peace finally came with the Iroquois Confederation, a bond of cooperation that was so strong a falling tree could not break it. The Iroquois were known as the people of the Longhouse. The Iroquois League was surrounded by Algonquian-speaking people, some of whom pushed the League south from today's Quebec. The Iroquois had a rich spiritual life, including the False Face Society that facilitated healing. They were best known for the effectiveness of their fierce warriors. Their military might was employed outward now. Women of the tribes practiced the sacred activity of farming, tending the 3 sisters, squash, beans, and corn. The stalks of corn were considered sacred children to be nourished with love, just as their issue nourished the people. While hunting contributed to the food supply, it was corn that sustained them. Even the maple tree provided sustenance. The sap from the maple tree was collected, boiled down, and saved as sugar, a skill passed on to newcomers who made maple syrup. This process was practiced by their neighbors as well. The first encounters with Europeans came in the early 1600s, when Samuel de Champlain, in Iroquois territory with Wendat warriors, was confronted by a group of Iroquois. Champlain killed 2 sachems with 1 shot from his firearm and scattered the dazed warriors. This made the French the enemies of the Iroquois League. The Iroquois regrouped to consider how to respond to these Europeans joined to their traditional enemies, the Wendat. Soon, Europeans were engaged in the trade of beaver pelts. Dutch and English traders did business with the Iroquois, and the Iroquois sought to control this trade. This trade supported the Iroquois in their competition with the French and the Wendat. Now the Iroquois had access to European goods. Objects like metal kettles, hatchets, and knives held almost mystical qualities when possessed for the first time. On a utilitarian level, they made life much easier and brought changes to every level of their society. Wampum continued to have value, mostly in forming alliances and sealing treaties. Even the wampum trade, though, was affected by the actions of Europeans. Peace among the 5 tribes of the Iroquois League was badly strained by the competition for beaver pelts. Iroquoian warriors expanded their area of influence and captured thousands of rivals, a source of new members for the tribe to replace Iroquoians killed in battle and by European diseases. Iroquois influence grew even into the Ohio region as they sought control of the beaver trade.
Way, hey, roll and go. Get cracking, me lads, it's a hell of a way to be rollickin' randy dandy, yo.
When Henry Hudson sailed this time, he sailed for England. He sailed further north, looking for that much sought-after Northwest Passage. What he found instead was a huge saltwater bay, now named Hudson's Bay, in his honor. Hudson was sure he could find a water route here to Asia. Just a year after claiming the Hudson River for the Dutch, this discovery would be the holy grail of European navigation and trade. Hudson overwintered in James Bay, eager to resume his search when the ice broke up. Most of Hudson's crew had suffered enough and wanted to go home. Hudson refused, so there was a mutiny. Hudson, his son, and a few loyal sailors were set out in a small open boat. They were never seen again. Hudson's voyage brought English claims to the North Country for the first time. This claim brought English ships and direct trade with the Inuit and Cree people. They would make journeys of great distance to trade beaver pelts for European goods. York Factory was established and the Hudson's Bay Company was chartered. England now claimed a great area of the north, calling it Rupert's Land. Trading posts were set up on Native American trade route crossings. New France governors ignored this English activity until it was too late to stop it. Now, English trappers competed with French voyageurs in the North Country. The Cree and other northern tribes would now encounter English traders in fierce competition with the French. French expansion northward and westward were no longer certain. Now that Native Americans had new trading partners, what other changes would they see? So now we have all the major interlopers from Europe. We have Portugal, Spain, France, and now England. So in our next episodes, we'll see how the interactions between these European countries have an effect on America's indigenous population. And with that, we close episode 105. Be sure to visit my website, letscreate.org. Thanks for watching. I'm John Letts.
You've been watching Ramping Up Your English, a support program for intermediate level English language learners. Learn more. Visit our website at letscreate.org. You can also watch or download today's program at archive.org/details/roguetv. Join us next time on RBTV Voices for Ramping Up Your English.